Hey, brothers and sisters, welcome to the Port. I'm excited to be here with you today. Before we get into our message, I'd like to ask a personal request. Please keep me in prayer as I need to learn how to manage my time a little better. I got a lot of things going on, and I've been pretty, by the grace of God, pretty effective in managing my time. But things there's a lot of things going on, and I need to kind of, I work full time. I'm a father, husband. I also exercise and I prepare messages for you guys, but I need the Lord to guide me and show me how He would want me to manage my time. So please keep me in prayer. I would really appreciate that, as I would love to bring these kinds of messages to you more effectively. But again, I need His guidance and in time management. So please keep that in prayer for me, okay? I'd really appreciate that. Thanks. So anyways, let's get right into our message today. And the title of the message is, Are You Making the Days Count? We're going to try to figure out today, just looking at this, what does God count? What days does God count, and what days does God not count? And are we making our days count? So we're going to do that. We're going to jump right into it and figure that out today. So we're going to be reading out of the book of Acts, chapter 13, verses 18 through 22. And it says, He put up with them through 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. And then he destroyed the 7 nations in Canaan and gave their land to Israel as an inheritance. All this took about 450 years. After that, God gave them judges to rule until the time of Samuel the prophet. And then the people begged for a king, and God gave them Saul the son of Kish, a man of the tribe of Benjamin, who would reign for 40 years. But God removed Saul and replaced him with David, a man about whom God said, I have found David, the son of Jesse, a man after my own heart. He will do everything I want him to do. And we know that if you read in 2 Samuel chapter 5, verse 4, we know that David ruled for 40 years. Now, when you look at this calculation, how many years from the Exodus, let's just say all the way to the building of Solomon's temple, how many years were they to the building of Solomon's temple, okay? From the Exodus to the building of Solomon's temple. And it's pretty much described here in this passage. It says it's 40 years. They had 40 years in the wilderness. Then there was 450 years when the land was given, when they destroyed the nations and the land was given to them. Then there was 40 years with Saul's reign, and then there was 40 years with David's reign. But when we add the 3 years prior to the building of the temple, of Solomon's temple, that's an extra 3 years. So the total of that is 573 years when you total that all together. That's the history of Israel from the Exodus to the beginning of the building of Solomon's temple. Now let's read out of 1 King chapter 6, verse 1, where it says, It was in mid-spring, in the month of Zi, during the fourth year of Solomon's reign, that he began to construct the temple of the Lord. This was 480 years after the people of Israel were rescued from their slaves in the land of This was 480 years after the people of Israel were rescued from their slavery in the land of Egypt. Now, this verse says 480 years rather than 573 years. We're talking about a 93-year difference. So we need to ask a question. Why is there a difference? Is Acts wrong, or is 1 Kings wrong? Now, let me tell you that both of those records are not wrong. They're both right, but there is basically a spiritual principle in the discrepancy of 1 King. Now, if you look at Acts, the record of the 40 years in the wilderness is correct. The 40 years of Solomon's reign is correct. And David's 40 years, we know is correct. And in the 4th year of Solomon's, the 3 years prior, we know that is correct. Okay? Kings basically has 93 years less than Acts. So where did those 93 years go? Okay, so in order to understand that, you need to do a study on Judges, the book of Judges. And as you study Judges, you see what happened to those 93 years. You see that during those seasons of Israel's life, Israel was subdued by heathen nations. Okay, so I'm just gonna go through it real quick. I'm gonna cite the passage and just summarize it. You're more welcome to read the passage on your own time. Go check it out. It's great. But we begin first with Judges chapter 3, verse 8, where it says, "Therefore the anger of the Lord burned against Israel, and he sold them into the hand of the king of Mesopotamia." And basically this king enslaved Israel, I'm paraphrasing, for 8 years. This was the first oppression of Israel, the first time that Israel suffered an oppression. This is the first count of it. Then if we read further down from Judges, we read verse 14, we see again the children of Israel served, I don't know how to say this, basically the king of Moab. They served that king for 18 years. This is the second period of oppression for Israel under a heathen nation. Then we go all the way to Judges chapter 4, verses 1 and 2, and we see that the Lord sold them into the hands of the king of Canaan, and he oppressed them, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm not reading it all. He oppressed the children of Israel for 20 years. Now, I'm not reading because I don't want to try to mention these kings' names, and I don't want to drag this out. I just want to go through it real quick. So please, if you want to read the whole thing, please go do it. You know, I totally encourage you. These are great reads. That was the third time that so let me just kind of review real quick, because these little interruptions. It was first 8 years in the king of Mesopotamia, and then there was the king of Moab for 18 years, and then it was the king of Canaan for 20 years. And here now is the fourth time. This is in Judges chapter 6, verse 1, where it says, "The children of Israel did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, and he delivered them into the hands of Midian for 7 years." This is the fourth time Israel was enslaved, and now this is the final time. It says in Judges 13:1, where it says, "The children of Israel again did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord delivered them into the hands of the Philistines, and they were enslaved for 40 years. This was the fifth time. Now, when you look at these numbers, these times where Israel was oppressed, we see it was 8 years, then it was 18 years, then it was 20 years, then it was 7 years, and then it was 40 years. And when you do the calculation, you see that the total is 900. It was 900. It was 93 years. 93 years. So we see where the discrepancy in Kings is, and the difference between Kings and Acts. In the book of Acts, Paul was speaking about the history of Israel, basically including the 93 years. But First King, the emphasis of First King is on the condition of Israel before the Lord. So he didn't count the 93 years. And there's a beautiful revelation in that. You see, there's a beautiful meaning on these 93 years that weren't counted by kings. These years, you could say, were pretty much lost years to Israel. Whenever Israel lost their freedom, whenever they were enslaved by heathen tribes, when they didn't have judges, those days to Israel were lost, were not counted. The Israelites, now we know that the Israelites, they belonged to the Lord. They were saved by the Lord. They were delivered out of Egypt by God. But whenever they were subdued and enslaved by their enemies, or when they were in bondage, whenever they couldn't worship the Lord freely, kings chose not to count. Those are lost days to Israel. Those were lost days. Whenever they served something other than God, those days were lost and were not counted in the Lord's sight. Now, let's do a personal application. I want you to consider the days that you were saved till now. And let me ask, let's just say that you were saved 8, 10 years. The question I would ask you is this. Out of those maybe 8, let's say 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years. Out of those days, how many of those days that you live by your own wisdom and your own strength? How many of those days that you try to make God's will happen? Because anytime you lived by your own strength or your own ways or your own will, those days did not count. Now, those days did not count. God does not count anytime we live by our own strength in life. Do you remember in the first teaching of Back to the Basics, I talked about how the cross pretty much got rid of, the cross got rid of the old man, and it buried and it crucified the old man. It did away, it judged the old man, this carnal thing. So whatever comes out of this thing, apart from God, it is waste. It is a waste of time. It is a waste of time. So anytime that you live by your own strength, by your own volition, by your own wisdom, by your own life, those are wasted times. Those days God doesn't even bother to look at. Because this cannot produce the things that God wants to produce in your life and to produce in your life. This cannot produce divine things. Only Him in us and us allowing Him, those are the things that can produce divine and eternal things, and those are the things that God counts. Any day that I do not live by the Spirit of God is a wasted day, is a day that is lost. Brothers and sisters, we need to learn the things that God counts are the things that God counts is when we live by His life and not by our life. Let's make every day count by living by His strength and not our strength. Amen. God bless you guys. And if you enjoyed this message, please hit a like and hit subscribe. And again, I keep encouraging you guys to please leave a comment. And please, if you have anything that you would want me to talk about, please share it with me. I would love to, share it with you guys and do some research on it and talk about it. Love you guys, and God bless.